Okay, thank you, Isabel. Let me introduce you to our group. We are many to introduce ourselves, so maybe they need to know you. And then I'll just summarize who we are in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Isabel Vogel. She's one of the leading trainers in monitoring and evaluation, as well as this course that we want to start on, get a snapshot on theory of change. She has vast experience in this subject, and she will take us through the introductory part, and later on, as I've said, she will take us through a full course, which is coming later on next year. Thank you, Isabel. Then we have Sophia. Sophia, can you wave? Sophia is a professor and also the leader of a program that is called Agri for Sale, Agriculture for Food Security. It's a program that is based at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Guys, it's also an opportunity to go and check on their website what programs are they offering. They are a well-known institution who are also into short courses and many other capacity building programs. We have been working with Sophia for many years, I think since 2016, 2017, thereabouts. So, Sophia, welcome and thank you. We have Agnes. Agnes is also working for SLD Global at Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences in Sweden. Again, let's take time to learn about this institution where we can see opportunities for collaboration. Agnes, thank you so much. And Tatenda is our staff member. I don't know where she is, but you know her. Tatenda, you're also welcome. So, Isabel, this is our group is composed of masters and PhD students and early career researchers, and we are 40 of us in this room. That's who we are at the moment. I take it back to you, and thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, it's really exciting to be able to share with everyone today an introduction to theory of change. And I'm sorry, only sorry I can't be there in the room with you. So yes, as Robert said, and thank you for the kind introduction, Robert. I'm Dr. Isabel Vogel, and I am a monitoring, evaluation, and learning expert, and I have been working with the Agri-Fosse 2030 program for about the same time. I first met Robert in 2016, so we've traveled many roads together in the program, and it's fantastic to be here today. So I will just I'll share my screen and start the presentation. So I'm going to speak hopefully for not too long, and give everybody a chance to ask questions and discuss. So yeah, sorry. So can I just check, are you seeing the audience view or the presenter view? Because my screens sometimes get muddled up.
We see the presenter.
Seeing the audience?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So as I was saying, and as Robert was saying, those of us on the screen are part of this program, of which Robert has been playing a key role as well. So that's the Agri-Fosse 2030 program. And what I will be doing today is giving you a kind of very short introduction to the theory of change approach. So I'll try and cover some of the basics, but I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, and some of them may only be able to be answered through the course. I think that I won't have time to cover everything today. But yeah, so we've done the introductions, but what I'll talk about is give you a kind of very brief overview of research with impact, because the point of the Agri-Fosse program as a whole is to translate science into practices and policies and regulations and actions and all kinds of things that people can actually work with and implement to create change in the world. So it's really about taking that academic research and putting it to use where it can influence change and improve things. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'll give the introduction to the theory of change approach, which is a way that can help us really kind of plan and think about how our research can have impact. And then we'll have time for some questions and discussions. And what I've chosen to share in the photo there is a picture from a theory of change workshop, because theory of change involves kind of getting together in a group and doing lots of mapping and working in quite creative ways to think about all of the different kind of pathways and ways in which your research can influence change. So it's just to give you a flavour of what a TOC workshop might look like. So TOC, which is some words I might use, is how we often shorten theory of change because it's quite a mouthful. But yeah, so switching back to thinking about research with impact. So I think all of us here are really interested in making sure that our research actually gets taken up and translated into action, because it's really important for achieving sustainable development goals. I know in Zimbabwe now there's a big emphasis on making investments in research and innovation actually travel out into the world and improve the country and the economy and society. So I think we all have that shared interest. So as I was saying, research projects who really want to make that practical difference to the world can benefit from working with a theory of change approach, because it's really a holistic way of thinking about design, planning, how you engage stakeholders, and then how you can also track your progress towards the change that you're looking for. So the TOC approach can actually help research projects have kind of increased impact and increased relevance for wider society. So I guess one of the challenges is that the impact that comes from research is incredibly broad. I mean, that's a kind of a word cloud that was generated just asking people what they thought when they think about research impact. So you can see some of the big words there are influence, policy, sustainability, but some of the other words are around credibility, partnership, actionability, transdisciplinary, lots of very long words there, but you can see all of this comes into the mix when we think about the impact that flows from research. And it's complicated or even complex because research contributes to society, culture, the environment, the economy, a huge range of different ways that it can contribute. A really simple way of thinking about research impact, which I quite like, is that impact is the good that researchers do in the world. And that's from a guy in the UK called Mark Reed. But I quite like that kind of very short way of thinking about it, because I think all of us are engaged in research because we want to make a difference and we want to do some good. But what does it actually look like? And it's quite difficult because research can be quite intangible. So if we start thinking about, what some of the immediate changes that might arise from research, if you read a new piece of research, you read some findings, it's potentially going to bring you greater understanding. It may raise your awareness about an issue. It may even prompt a bit of an attitude change, maybe a reframing of an issue and how you'd been thinking about it or seeing it. a lot of research actually directly brings kind of new ways of doing things. So it contributes to changes in skills and capacities. And we can think about those changes as kind of being the immediate changes of what might happen when you first, or a stakeholder or somebody first engages with research. But then we need to think along like a sequence or a pathway. So what comes after that? What might research contribute to after that? So, if we pick up something, or say a decision maker picks up something and it's changed their awareness or it's brought new skills to them, then they may decide to develop that into a set of guidelines or a new approach for doing something. And so that will lead to some changes in decision making or behavior change, and that might be in a specific domain. So around practices, or it might be around service delivery, or around just kind of offering training to build up and embed and broaden out new skills. It may mean actually feeding into a new policy or a new law or a new regulation, which will actually then create change on a bigger scale, actually changing the enabling environment of how things are done. So those might be kind of changes at that mid-level. And then if over time those kind of behavior changes, perhaps it's a new regulation, so it's changed the way a whole sector is working and doing business, then you might see kind of longer term changes on a much bigger scale in terms of changes in the economy, or changes in improvements in the environment, or it may be changes around health and well-being, or greater kind of social and cultural benefits that have arisen from the use and application of that research. But my slide looks really neat and tidy, but we know in the real world that things don't happen in a neat and tidy way, and actually research pathways are very complex, involving many different individuals, many different institutions, and many different systems. So, you may read and engage with the research, and it may not feed at that moment in time into some decision making change or regulation change, but over time and in an iterative way, things will build up and contribute to that longer term change. But I guess the key takeaway from all the work and the research that I've done over my career is that research impact is not a moment. It's this kind of sequence and this pathway of different changes at different scales that build up. So that's the kind of key idea that will help us kind of understand how theory of change can help. So to take an example from the Agrifossé program, just to illustrate, so how can research kind of help improve livestock production amongst smallholder farmers? And actually there's a whole range of different spaces and places at which science and social science knowledge can inform and improve. So around, say, decision making and behaviours at levels that shape the enabling environment. So that might be the community directly, and informing changes in their practice. It may be at the municipal or local government level, that maybe is administrating a strategy to support livestock production. It may influence change at sort of a province or county state level, and on through to kind of national, regional, and even international spaces. There are all sorts of kind of policies and implementation that shape livestock production, and particularly the enabling environment for smallholder farmers. So it could be sectoral ministries, regulatory bodies, it could be businesses, extension services, commercial and private sector, and science and social science can bring insights and findings to improve thinking and skills at all of those levels. So I'm not going to keep running through the list, because I think you get the picture. There are multiple points at which research can feed in. And this can make it difficult when you're thinking, well, where does my research fit in? What can my research contribute to this kind of very complex space? And again, that's where tools like theory of change can help us, because it can help us map out a pathway to impact for our research, thinking about who the stakeholders and actors that we actually need to engage and think about our research and make sure that we're translating our research in ways that they can pick up and understand. And this cartoon I quite like, because often we see in proposals for projects that, we're going to do the research and then this huge change will happen. And we don't really think about what needs to happen in between. It's kind of, a big question mark. So again, theory of change is an approach that was created to try and really help us map out that sequence of change, to help us just be more intentional and more targeted and strategic. So I'll come on now and talk about what is theory of change as an approach. So this is a long slide with a lot of text, which I'll try and summarize, but it comes from a guide to theory of change that I co-authored a few years ago, and I think I just couldn't kind of say it any better than we said it there. So in a way, in many ways, theories of change are everywhere. So they're all the ideas and the narratives and the opinions that we have about how change happens, and we carry those in our minds and in our conversations everywhere, and they really kind of form the sort of underpinnings for actions and strategies that we might take to create change. So, a very common idea that lots of us carry is that, well, if we just give people more information about something, then they will change their behavior. And the classic one is around the health problems around smoking. And there's been so much research and so much information provided, and still it's really hard for people to change their behavior. So that's a theory of change that doesn't really work, but still really common and that's carried around. So a lot of our theories are unconscious. We don't really articulate them, and they come from really our broad life experience. But if we leave them kind of tacit and sitting in our heads and not explored, then we create these kind of mental models about how change might happen that might lead to misaligned strategies, which may at best be ineffective, or at worst could be actually damaging. So we could be keeping lots of people carrying on smoking, even though we know all of the health problems that it causes, because we just haven't really thought about what might be the right strategy. And actually coming together and having broader discussions and sharing our ideas about change can really challenge sort of conventional approaches and help stop us making mistakes. So again, another cartoon which I think is really nice. That maybe where we were a community of bridge builders and we love building bridges, but sometimes bridge is not the answer. It's not the right theory of change. And we need to take a step back and look at the situation, try and bring all of our kind of mental models and critically interrogate them in order to get a better solution, which in this case might be a boat. So coming back to what is theory of change, the approach. So it is a methodology or an approach to unpacking these mental models about why and how we think change will happen. So in the first place, it's a structured approach to a group-based critical reflection. So we work through a series of steps to really bring some rigor to the critical thinking. It encourages us to explore the challenging situation that we kind of want to improve and how change could happen to address it. And it explains how our initiative might contribute to a sequence of changes, like that sequence of research impact, to support the change that we're looking for. And it helps us to create a pathway or a number of different pathways to impact, which we can then help to guide our planning and our implementation. And for research, that can often mean that we approach a situation with a research question already in mind, but by exploring a bit more deeply, we might find it's not quite the right question, and actually we need to reframe that, because that way, we'll, be able to better contribute to the change that's needed. So in a really simple way, it's a bit like, a baby has a theory of change. It cries, the parents and carers appear. So we do something and there's a result or a consequence from that action. And so at its simplest level, theory of change is trying to help us to think, well, if we do this, what will happen? And if that happens, what will happen after that? And then we need to really dig into the arrows. Is crying going to be enough? Or do we need to bring other things that need to happen? So theory of change as the approach, as the methodology, has three aspects. One is this kind of, group-based critical thinking about change that I was just talking about, and where we come together perhaps in a workshop and we use lots of stickies and wall charts and bring all our thinking together. And it's that kind of systematic process that we work through a series of steps in order and in a group setting to bring our thinking together. And then it's also a set of products. So usually with theory of change, we produce a visual or a diagram. So for example, this photo of what's on the wall, we would try and convert that into a diagram to capture our thinking around all the pathways. And we usually have a narrative that explains what's going on and how that change is going to happen. So that diagram would be converted to something like with different arrows and boxes, but we can be much more creative actually in how we represent it, and I'll show you some examples. And then the kind of principles to make it a really good process is that we need to have kind of wide participation and a sense of ownership. So the group of people who are going to be involved in working with that theory of change, working with that project, need to feel their views are reflected there and that they really get it and they get what the theory of change is saying. So we have that ownership. We also want to make sure the theory of change is underpinned by a comprehensive analysis of the context, but also lots of evidence and research about kind of what might help that change to happen. And then we really need to use that theory of change. So not just leave it as a nice diagram or document and never come back to it. And the really key part about the theory of change is about making these assumptions and beliefs and mental models explicit, and that's a key part of the approach. So an assumption is, as I was saying before, all these things that we think are true or accepted are true, but often we don't realize that there are many different perspectives on what we think is true. So we have again another cartoon of many different ways of looking at the pig. It might be food, it might be a nice animal to draw. It might be something that's actually quite taboo that we don't. It's not a positive thing in our cultural society. So this is why we need to bring together different perspectives to really help us understand lots of different ways that we can understand how change happens and bring those assumptions. So that's what the point is saying there on the slide. So theory of change helps us to make these assumptions, theories, and worldviews explicit and explore them. So I talked a bit about this TOC being a kind of a structured approach and that we follow a series of steps. So I hope this is readable from the room, but this is the approach that I recommend people follow. There are other versions of theory of change as well. Hopefully they're fairly similar. And for me, the first step is always to kind of be really clear on what your purpose is for working with theory of change. Partly because you need to select kind of which parts of the process are most appropriate for your situation. So you may be, for example, at the very beginning of your research project and just starting to plan it. So you want to have something that's kind of a TOC process that's very open and is starting from first principles. In other situations, you may be coming into a program that's maybe entering its second phase or its third phase, and a lot of things are already in place. So you want to bring some new thinking, but not from first principles. So being really focused about what your purpose is and how much is up for discussion in theory of change is really key, and it's the first step. Step 2 is really thinking about what is the challenge that you're hoping to address. So, in the previous example with AgriForsett as a program, it's really trying to improve the productivity and livelihoods and well-being of smallholder farmers. So the program as a whole has really kind of analysed that situation and all the different dimensions to it, and how different farmers in different places are affected, and trying to kind of really understand that, and then think about, well, what's the change that we really want to bring around that? And through kind of understanding the challenge, it helps you understand what the change might be. And we set that as an envisioned future situation as the goal that we're going to work towards. Then we come back to today in step 3, and then we really do that deep dive about mapping and analysing the current context around the issue, looking at the kind of drivers of what some of the problems might be, but also what opportunities there might be to bring change. And again, in AgriForsett, we're working through different projects that all of them identified kind of different opportunities that actually, if we can bring a change in practice here, it's going to really help improve incomes and improve livelihoods. So in earlier phases, we did a lot of mapping and understanding that context. Step 4, I've called kind of system sense making. So when you've done this kind of big analysis of the context, you've got to kind of make sense of it. There's a lot that you cannot influence, but looking and seeing, well, where are there some entry points? Maybe there's a new regulatory process coming up in your particular area that actually you could really bring some research and evidence to inform that. So that will give you a kind of entry point. You can't change everything, but that little piece could make a really big difference. So it takes a bit of thinking through where's your entry point and making sense of that system. Then step 6 is where we kind of map those pathways and thinking about, well, if we do this, what will happen? If that happens, what might we do next, or what might we be able to contribute? What change would be needed? And building up that sequence of changes to support your future vision that you identified in step 2. Step 7 is where you think about your monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So what will tell us that change is happening the way we want it to happen, and thinking about that. In smaller projects, that's probably less easy or appropriate to do. In a bigger program like AgriForsett, we've identified different kind of indicators and things that are going to tell us that change is heading in the right direction. And then step 8 is equally important, because we need to keep coming back to that theory of change, and use it to help us keep on track, but also where things might be different to what we thought at the start, or maybe there's been a different response to one of our activities and we need to change things. We need to keep using it as a live tool. And it's all on an arrow because, again, theory of change being iterative. So I'm pretty sure this will raise more questions than answers at this point, but this is where the TOC course will take much more time in taking you through these steps and what's involved. I'm just giving you a very quick overview. And basically, at each of those steps, we use lots of different tools to help guide our thinking and keep our kind of group process really as productive as possible. So, we can draw on evidence and learning in that top left-hand corner. That's all about kind of different models about how change happens. There are other tools like this one, the future triangle, that can help us really think about what do we need to see in the future in terms of a more positive change. There are tools to help us analyze the context. This is one called Rich Picture that we've used quite a bit in the AgriFoSSE program. There's another kind of tool to help us create the whole canvas, to help us map our pathways, called Spheres of Influence. And then, yeah, there's kind of this pathways mapping, which we can work forwards and backwards to develop that. So again, it's not something I'm going to go into a lot of detail, but it's just to give you an illustration of at each of the stages, we use lots of different tools and creative tools to help that kind of critical thinking and development. And Robert perhaps he's been through many theories of change processes now, so he can share a little bit of that. I guess to give something more manageable to take away from today, this is a kind of simple TOC for research impact. And it goes from the bottom to the top. And it starts with here the kind of outputs and activities. So research, these are things that you might produce, like maybe a policy brief or some analysed data that you want your potential research users to engage with. And then you actually get that engagement and involvement that you're looking for from specific research users. So all of that's kind of called research uptake. Then they start to react in different ways and have changes in their awareness. And that's, again, sort of changes in capacity or changes in awareness of the issues. And then over time, that will start to lead to that research being applied, and that might lead to changes in knowledge or skills. And then over time, that might lead to changes in behavior and practices, and then the kind of final outcomes and contribution. And on this right-hand side, it gives you some of the things that you could potentially track, the progress measures to potentially track. So you've got, of course, your activities, you've got how you've used different engagement strategies with different groups to get the engagement. You may be able to observe or measure reactions and changes in the awareness in the research users you've engaged with. Then there might be learning measures that can help you understand how skills or knowledge is changing. And then beyond that, you may observe kind of more changes in behaviors and practices and be able to analyze those changes. And then the very long-term changes are very far away from the research, but again, there may be things that are possible to track at that level. But that's I think when we share the slide deck, that's a kind of a very simple application of TOC for research. This is the AgriFoSSE theory of change. So you can see it's kind of much more complicated. We've got lots of different stages. We are working to kind of much longer time frames, so several years across the bottom. And I can't really zoom in, but it gives you just an idea of how, as a program, and Robert's also been involved in contributing to the discussions around this, but this is gives us the big framework for all of the changes that we're wanting to see through projects, through developing the hubs, and ultimately contributing to the long-term impact here on the right-hand side, which are lots of benefits for smallholder farmers. So yeah, that's kind of the end of everything that I thought would be interesting to share in an introduction to theory of change. I'm sure it's a lot and you have a lot of questions. So yeah, let's go on to sharing some of your thoughts and reactions to everything I've shared today. So yeah, maybe you want to think about, it'd be really interesting for me to hear, have you come across TOC before? Can you see any opportunities to work with TOC in your research project? Are there kind of challenges that you can see? I'm sure there are plenty of challenges that you can see in working with TOC. your projects, but it would be great to have a bit of discussion and conversation about it. But overall, I hope it's given you something of interest and that will kind of get you interested in thinking about the course when it comes on next year. So I will stop there and hand back to Robert.
Thank you, Isabel. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a round of applause for
Thank you.